Adding items to Terraria is cool. I mean, that's why we make mods. And while I could sit there brainstorming for human-made and somewhat well-designed ideas, why do that when we've got AI? I asked different AIs for weapon ideas, and I'll be ranking each of them based on 3 points. The original idea for the weapon attacks, its obtention method, and the final in-game result and gameplay, which might be unfair because I'll be making the entire visuals and code for these items myself without the help of AI, but... First on the list is Grok, which is the Twitter chatbot.
The Shadow Flame Reaper is a melee weapon resembling a large ethereal scythe wreathed in purple-black flames. When swung, it performs a wide 180-degree arc attack that deals high base damage. Upon hitting an enemy, it inflicts the Shadow Flame debuff, which causes lingering fire damage over time, similar to the Shadow Flame knife but amplified, and reduces the enemy's defense by 10%.
That's a solid start. Although the Shadow Flame debuff already exists, and is used by other, well, Shadow Flame weapons. And a 10% defense reduction is not useful, especially for a slow and hard-hitting weapon, so we'll get rid of that.
Additionally, holding the attack button charges a spin attack that releases a burst of Shadow Flame projectiles in all directions.
Honestly, while it's pretty simple since it's all about custom swing patterns, it should still feel good to use in-game, and still feel pretty unique since those aren't in every single mod quite yet. That's a good 4 out of 5 for the concept, losing a point for the excessive and wrong description of the Shadow Flame debuff.
This weapon is crafted at a mithril or orichalcum anvil after defeating Plantera. The recipe requires 20 hallowed bars, 10 souls of sight from the twins, 10 souls of might from the destroyer, 10 souls of fright from Pumpkin during the frost moon, and 1 Shadow Flame knife.
Okay, I hate this recipe. That should be a post-mechanical boss's weapon. The AI simply got the load source for Souls of Fright wrong. And we already have a hallowed bar melee weapon at this point of the game. Actually, we have 2. And there's no way I'm putting a Shadow Flame knife in there just because it's also a Shadow Flame item. If you're gonna make an upgrade for a weapon, at least make sure it's an actual upgrade to the weapon, like the Onyx Blaster for the shotgun. They do the same thing, but the blaster just does it better. 2 out of 5. At least it's somewhat coherent. There's no reason to overthink it, and it's probably just better as a Goblin Warlock drop in the first place. This is what I came up with for the axe. Oh yeah, it's an axe now. It's a slow and heavy weapon with a custom swing animation. After swinging twice, it does a full spin and releases 8 homing projectiles that will hit nearby enemies. Damage-wise, it falls behind other early hard mode weapons, but catches up during the 3rd swing because it will hit twice and gets bonus damage from the projectiles. It's still a melee weapon, and the further away you are from your target, the more projectiles will miss. It's really satisfying to use, and really safe, assuming you don't miss when attacking enemies. But it's also really bad against bosses, even more so than other melee ranged weapons because most of the damage comes from the 3rd swing, which you can easily miss. I think it's a 4.5, because it is really fun, and doesn't have glaring flaws, giving Grok a score of 3.5 out of 5. Second is Claude, and if you don't know what it is, never did I before making this video. Well, it's another AI as far as I'm concerned, so here we go.
The Hive Launcher is an early hard mode ranger weapon that fires volatile bee larvae which explode on impact, releasing 4 to 6 angry bees that seek out nearby enemies.
A early hard mode ranger weapon that fires bees. Well, I guess the AI wants us to go back to the underground jungle, which is odd since there's no new content in there in the early hard mode. A ranger weapon firing a few bees is also really original. I wonder if I've already seen that somewhere.
The launcher itself has moderate damage, but the real power comes from the swarm of bees that linger for several seconds, repeatedly stinging enemies in range.
I sure wonder if I've already seen that somewhere.
The weapon uses a special hive casing ammunition, crafted from 1 stinger and 1 hive block for 25 hive casings, making it economical to use once you have access to a bee farm or jungle.
So the ammunition is really annoying to get. I can't wait to farm 1 stinger for 25 shots. And what even is a bee farm?
The Hive Launcher drops from the Queen Bee boss with a 25% chance. This makes it one of the first specialized ranged weapons you can obtain in hard mode, since Queen Bee can be fought immediately after the Wall of Flesh.
I mean, that's not false. You can also fight King Slime or the Eye of Tulu immediately after defeating the Wall of Flesh, if you're feeling adventurous. There's nothing to salvage from this suggestion. The concept is bad down to the details, and the acquisition method is bad. I've had to prompt most AIs in this video at least a couple times before I got decent ideas, so let's give it another shot.
The Stormbreaker crossbow is an early hard mode ranger weapon that fires electrified bolts which can chain lightning between nearby enemies. When a bolt strikes an enemy, it releases an arc of electricity that jumps up to 3 additional targets within moderate range.
That's a really simple but really cool idea. The concept of chain lightning in games is not particularly rare, but it's never used in vanilla Terraria, although we've seen it in a few mods. That's a 5 out of 5 for the concept. The description given by the AI is perfectly fine and functional without any changes.
The Stormbreaker crossbow is crafted at a mithril or orichalcum anvil using 12 hallowed bars, 10 souls of light, and 8 crystal shards. Alternatively, it has a 10% chance to drop from archwyverns in the early hard mode sky.
The recipe isn't particularly original, but it's not bad either. There aren't really any sources of loot themed around storms or electricity in the game, except maybe Martians, but they don't really fit the vibe of the item. Another gripe is that there's already a repeater made with hallowed bars. That's a 3 out of 5 for the loot source. It's a good try, but doesn't find a good solution. And I personally have no idea where to place it, to be honest. Also, archwyverns are not in the game. This is how it turned out. It's a bit slower than other crossbows or repeaters, and can shoot any arrow. But if you use wooden arrows, they turn into storm bolts, which will bounce towards nearby enemies between 3 and 5 times. What's interesting is this makes the weapon really strong when used against 2 enemies specifically, as that's when they will each take the most damage. And naturally, it's really bad when used against a single enemy, because the projectile doesn't get to bounce around. And while that could have been fixed easily, I also think it's more interesting this way. Because of the limited bounces, this is a lot worse against the destroyer than you'd expect, especially compared with other actual piercing weapons. But it's really fun to use, and I think the projectiles turned out nice looking even though they're basically just a lot of dust. I think a 3.5 out of 5 is fair, giving Claude a score of 3.8 out of 5. So, given how AI models work by accumulating a bunch of ideas from the internet and morphing them into their responses, aren't these ideas some kind of plagiarism? Well, I hope that fixing them and implementing these items myself is enough to give me some credit at least. Each item remains a sizable amount of work and polishing to get right. And given how bad or confused some suggestions can be, I am unsure if there's something a person would come up with anyways. Next up, we have ChatGPT. Interestingly, this is the one that required the most attempts to get a decent idea. And I don't know why, but every time I click the temporary chat feature, it will suggest a post-Plantera boss as the loot source for the item. Every single time.
The Luminant Tether conjures a radiant chain of hard light that lashes out towards your cursor. When it connects with an enemy, it tethers them briefly, causing them to take increased damage from all sources for a few seconds. The tether pulses 3 times, each pulse dealing increasing magic damage before shattering. The weapon drains mana steadily while the tether is active, and cancels if you move too far from your target or run out of mana.
The way I understand it, this is some kind of magic piranha gun that breaks when the player gets too far. The increased damage from all sources is bad design, as this gives a lot of free damage to all classes when used as a side weapon, and this is not something I want to encourage if I can help it. Looking at you, Thorian Bard. And the few seconds duration is a bit too vague. Have the chain last for a long time and it won't feel good to use because it only deals damage 3 times. And have it last for a short time and the player has to reset it constantly, which will make it annoying to use and not good as a side weapon. The way I see it, this would be used like the Rainbow Gun or Crimson Rod, giving passive damage if the player can position or use the item properly. The idea of a damaging chain that breaks is a decent basis, but the AI did not give enough details and I have a lot to adapt for it to be usable. 2 out of 5?
The Luminant Tether can be crafted at a mithril or orichalcum anvil using 20 hallowed bars, 10 souls of light, 10 pixie dust, and a crystal serpent.
This is a really confusing recipe. I have no idea why the crystal serpent is in there, as the weapon is clearly not an upgrade for it. And do you actually want to force players to fish for a weapon before they can upgrade it? But it's functional, and at least all materials are obtained roughly at the same point in progression. 2.5 out of 5, slightly worse than Claude because of the crystal serpent. In-game, I themed it around the Forbidden set, because I felt like the Chains of Light idea was a nice match for its Egyptian theme. Clicking an enemy will link it to the player, which deals damage once every second. If the player gets too far from their target, the chain will break, and its range is indicated by the chain tightening as the player gets further away, before stretching right as it's about to break. Up to 3 chains can exist at once, and adding new ones will break the oldest one. They last for 15 seconds, which gives plenty of time to swap weapons and get value out of them if you manage to stay in range, which can be hard against bosses. Sadly, while the concept is cool, this is not a very interactive weapon and requires more work to be good. Maybe being able to move the chained enemies, or at least having to interact with them in some way to deal damage. But this is a lot more work, and it was starting to get a bit too far from the original AI idea. It can also easily be abused by face-tanking builds to get some more free damage, as range is a lot less of an issue when you're inside the boss anyways. The weapon lacks something to be interesting, even though by Terraria standards this is pretty unique already. It's a 1.5, there's potential for it to be good with more time, but right now it's pretty bad gameplay-wise, which gives ChatGPT a score of 2 out of 5. Next up is GitGudWO, who's not an artificial intelligence but an actual idiot. Same letters, it's an AI as far as I'm concerned.
Hello?
So I want to ask you for a weapon idea and see if your idea is better than the AI's. Like, the entire concept of this video is trying to find out which AI has the best weapon ideas.
Yeah?
You should come up with a concept for a Terraria weapon. Give me like how it's used, where you obtain it, and ideally it should be like an early hard mode weapon. You have like 2 minutes.
Now?
Now.
Right now? At
Now.
this point?
Yeah.
So I'm doing early hard mode, right?
Yeah.
So, ideally, since early hard mode, the bosses you will be fighting are the mechanical bosses, it needs to be ranged. Like, even if it's melee, it needs to have some range capabilities, potential. I'd say to obtain it, I want it to be creative, right? I feel like dungeon during early hard mode is really underutilized. And people only go to the dungeon after Plantera, so I feel like the weapon should be obtainable in the dungeon. To obtain it, you need to douse water bucket. Until you know those flaming wheel enemies? Those flaming enemies? The wheel fire enemies? Yeah. You douse water bucket onto them. It will create the obsidian scythe. Yeah.
Well, I can't prompt this one again. This is the least original weapon idea we've had so far. Though it's actually insane he managed to come up with one on the fly after thinking for a couple seconds only. Try it, it's actually really hard. The early hard mode dungeon is indeed neglected, but it's not like we can add items in there without adding new enemies and challenges to go with them. It's not that easy. And his obtention method of placing a water bucket on one of the flaming wheels is one of the ideas of all times.
What does it do? It is basically a slightly worse death sickle. So, when you convert it to death sickle later on, you could make the true death sickle. Yeah, very creative, right?
So, an early hard mode death sickle it is, which already exists in the game. That's a score of 1 for the concept, and 2 for the obtention method. In-game, it's an early hard mode death sickle. I did what he asked me. Look, Thermometer even allows me to clone an existing projectile. You don't get more accurate than this. Anyways, 1 out of 5 for the in-game result. That's a total score of 1.3 out of 5 for GitGudWO. Coming up, we have Dipsick, which is that weird Chinese ChatGPT knockoff.
The Tether Blade is a sleek, crystalline short sword. Its primary attack is a quick, short-range stab. However, its true power lies in its secondary right-click function. Primary, a standard rapid stabbing motion, deals modest damage. Secondary, you throw the Tether Blade. It travels in a straight line for a moderate distance. Once it reaches its maximum range or hits a block, it lodges itself in that spot.
So far, it's a short sword you can throw. Why not?
Once the sword is lodged, an ethereal tether connects you to the blade. Pressing right-click again will instantly teleport you to the blade's location, dealing area of effect damage to any enemies at the arrival point. If the tether passes through enemies, it saps their life force, dealing constant damage over time and granting you a minor lifesteal. If you right-click a third time, the blade instantly recalls to your hand. The secondary throw and teleport consume a small amount of mana.
That's actually really cool, although the third right-click part is a bit overcomplicated. And there's no way I'm giving mana consumption or lifesteal to the weapon for the sake of it. It just doesn't make any sense for a melee weapon that teleports the player. That's a 3 for the concept, losing a few points because it went into freestyle at the end.
The Tether Blade is crafted at an ancient manipulator with 1 broken hero sword, 18 luminite bars, 15 vortex fragments, and 5 souls of flight. This places its acquisition firmly in the post-Moonlord tier, making it a powerful and versatile final reward for a melee-focused playthrough.
I'm not gonna lie, I clearly didn't expect this to be a post-game item, especially since the AI mentioned the word crystalline at the beginning. which is tied to the Underground Hollow, the biome with teleporting elementals and the Rod of Discord. Vortex fragments are a ranger resource, Swords of Flight have no business being in a weapon recipe and are trivial to obtain anyways. And honestly, how exactly are you supposed to use a short sword at this point of the game? The weapons we're given to fight the Moonlord in the first place are straight up ranged items, as the eyes keep moving away from the player. And as a final reward, this is competing with the Zenith. That's a 1.5 for the recipe. I hate it. In-game, I made it a hallowed biome item, which I can easily imagine being dropped by crystal mimics or crafted with crystal shards and swords of light. It functions like a successor to the Gladius, with fast, short-ranged stabs, but it can be thrown by right-clicking, before clicking again to teleport. This effect has a 2 seconds cooldown, which is here to prevent the player from spamming it, but should never be an issue when playing normally. After teleporting, the sword will stab at all nearby enemies, with double range and triple damage, which is really good at dealing with group targets. This is my favorite weapon so far, and I think it would make an amazing item to obtain right after defeating the Wall of Flesh, and use while exploring in early hard mode. I easily give this a 5 for the gameplay part, which gives it a score of 3 out of 5. Finally, we have Gemini, Google's AI model. And if you like these devlogs, please consider subscribing to the channel. I'll be able to create a lot more if I manage to get an income from YouTube at some point.
The Stellar Shard Scepter does not fire a typical projectile. Instead, when used, it summons a miniature orbiting stellar shard that rapidly circles the player for 5 seconds.
This is midway between a summoner and a mage weapon, but I'm not a fan of the idea of swapping in and out of the item every 5 seconds. Side weapons are fine, but this is just too much and will feel clunky in practice.
While active, the shard automatically targets and fires a fast, homing beam of light at the nearest enemy. Up to 3 stellar shards can be active at a given time, using the scepter 3 times. Each active shard fires its own independent homing beam, allowing for a significant and sustained damage output.
Very straightforward, this reminds me of the Spirit Flame, and to some extent the Life Drain, which is a totally valid design for a magic weapon. 4 out of 5, because of the choice between the clunkiness of swapping all the time and doing nothing 80% of the time.
The Stellar Shard would be a post-Skeletron, pre-hard mode weapon. It's crafted at a mithril or orichalcum anvil, with 20 souls of light and 15 crystal shards, which are hard mode materials, 5 fallen stars, 5 greater healing potions, and a Sky Fracture, an existing late pre-hard mode magic weapon.
A post-Skeletron pre-hard mode weapon crafted at a mithril anvil with hard mode materials and a weapon that's already an upgrade. This is all over the place, and the most incoherent recipe we've seen so far. I love how the segment starts by describing the item as a pre-hard mode weapon and ends up as an early hard mode one. And why are there healing potions in the recipe? 1 out of 5. At least the materials exist in the game, I guess? This is how it turned out in-game. Using the weapon summons up to 5 orbiting stars around the player. Just like the Spirit Flame, I made it so it requires the player to constantly channel the weapon for it to function, and is balanced around the mana cost of the Crystal Storm. When the player stops using the weapon, the stars will stop being channeled, and disappear one by one. Each star will continuously attack the nearest enemy, but they will always prioritize bosses if possible. And in order to avoid shooting through walls, there needs to be a direct line between the player and the enemy for the projectiles to appear. Without it, the weapon would be way too strong in the early hard mode case. I think this turned out alright, and despite being pretty shallow gameplay wise, it's a nice looking weapon. Probably a nice 3.5 out of 5, giving Gemini a total score of 2.8 out of 5. Thank you for watching. If you're interested in playing with the items, they should end up in the Thorium mod at some point in the future. And if you thought my rating system was bad, so did I.